Ladies and gentlemen, as a presenter, it's really important that you connect. People that are sitting on the edges to move to the center, and the people that are on the outside, please to move into the center section so that Alan's neck doesn't get sore when he's doing this presentation today. Should I introduce myself a bit too before? Yeah. It's my pleasure to introduce a candidate for the head of school position. 1,200 rupees. And I says, no, I'm not going to pay you 1,200 rupees for that. So eventually I offered him 800, and he said no. I said, okay, I'm leaving. So out we go. The next day, Jody and I go up to a hotel or resort in the foothills of the Himalayas, and we're there for the weekend. And about halfway through the weekend, Jody looked at me and said, Joe, I wanted that Buddha. I says, don't worry, dear. We're going back on Monday. On the way to the airport, we'll stop, we'll pick it up. We get down to Kathmandu. It's a holiday. Everything's closed. So, no Buddha. Return to Mumbai, and a little while later, I understand we're having a meeting in Mumbai, and our guest today, Alan, is going to be at the meeting. And he's there. He is the head of school at Kathmandu. So I got a hold of Alan, and I said, Alan, I need a favor. He says, what can I do for you? He says, there's a Buddha. And I'm sure he thought, yeah, there's 10,000 of them in the city. What are you talking about? I said, no, it's a specific Buddha. And I described where the store was, and I described the Buddha. And Alan came down a little while later, and I had the Buddha, which I gave to Jody. I was the husband of the month. And I want to thank Alan for that, because it was. I think it demonstrates the kind of character that we have in Alan, who is willing to help whenever he can. And certainly he didn't have to, and it probably wasn't easy for him to find that Buddha. So Alan, I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about yourself. I welcome you. It was great connecting with you again.
Yeah, I am a shopping consultant. If you need some assistance, my wife has trained me well for that. So thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure to come visit Brasilia for a couple of whirlwind days and to see EAB. Certainly my impressions of 2 days here are that you've got really an outstanding staff, and you're doing good things for the students that you're serving. And interesting today at lunch, had some middle school kids and some high school kids, and one of the middle school kids that was selected to meet with me was a former student of mine from Tunis. And so he's been here for 2 years, so we got to compare some stories about similar. Lucas in 8th grade. Yeah. So, and I'd heard from somebody in the community earlier that there was a family here that had come from Tunis, and they didn't know who it was. So today we made the connection. It was pretty fun. Small world stuff. So anyway, my name is Alan Brady. It's spelt like that. It's pronounced like the Brady Bunch or Tom Brady if you're a little younger. And it's actually a name that was sort of altered when my family immigrated to Canada, actually. I'm American. I'm also Canadian, dual national. My parents were Canadian high school kids when they had me, and my dad went down and joined the U.S. military. And so I was born in the U.S. to Canadian parents, just sort of the opposite of Ted Cruz. And that's all we have in common. So anyway, I'm essentially from Washington State. My home is up in the very northwest corner of Washington State, a town called Bellingham. And I lived in Europe as a kid. My dad was in the military, as I said, but we kind of settled there in Washington State when I was in my middle school years. So I went to high school there, went to university, and then began teaching in public schools. My undergraduate degree is actually in political science and history of the Western Hemisphere, non-U.S. Got that? So Canada and Latin America. So that's one of the reasons that Brasilia is of interest to me, is that I've been working now in the U.S., of course, Southeast Asia, South Asia, North Africa, have lived in Europe, and so it's time for a stint in Latin America, at least in my mind. So my wife Julie is here with me. She's a teacher as well, and she's taught special education, upper elementary, and middle school humanities. We have 2 sons that graduated from international schools and are now just finishing up university. They both have degrees, and they're getting teaching credentials now after much discussion. So, but they had great experience. We went overseas 16 years ago. I had taught in public schools and then was a public school principal of a school of about 1,600 kids in Washington State. And we went overseas, and my first role was at Singapore American School. I was a middle school principal there. We were there for 5 years. Some of you will know that school. It's the biggest American international school in the world. 4,000 students now, 3,000 at that time. And then from there, after 5 years, I took my first head of school job, and that was at the Lincoln School in Kathmandu, where I was able to help Joe with his shopping. And 5 years there, and then we moved on to Tunisia. And I've been the head of the American Cooperative School of Tunis. Now, this is my 6th year. Next year will be year 7 there. So, okay. So I was asked at this time to make a presentation about your mission and vision. And so I've prepared a short presentation. I'll try not to belabor it too long, and then give you a chance to ask me some questions as well. Okay? So let's see how far this clicker will work. So first off, I understand the history of this. This is a couple years old, this revised mission and vision statement. 1 year. And I would, just as a kind of a general response to it before I talk about some of the specific pieces of it, I'd like to congratulate you on it. I think it's relative to most mission statements in international schools, it's concise. It's not a long, rambling 6 or 7 sentence paragraph that no one remembers. Certainly, it's concise. There's a lot packed into that, and it's memorable. So I think you've done a nice job with that. And certainly, I have a lot of affinity with it, and I'll talk about some of the specific pieces and my sort of thoughts about it. So the first piece is the learners inspiring learners piece, which I think is sort of the flagship element of it, the most memorable piece. And that strikes me as a statement of modeling lifelong learning and continuous improvement over time, which obviously is a necessity in education. We've got to stay current, and our students have got to see models of people that keep growing and learning throughout their lives. And as most of us know, many of the jobs that the students you're teaching now will work in don't exist yet. Technology hasn't created them yet. And so we know that they're going to have to have good math, science, writing skills, speaking skills, critical thinking skills, collaboration skills. And so that we know. And so we can help prepare them, but we have to also prepare them to have a mindset of continuous growth and change. They'll likely change careers several times and have to sort of recreate themselves career-wise. So I think that's a powerful statement. It seems to suggest to me a partnering of the three main components of an important piece of education, and that's the school, the students, and their parents. And I think that's one thing that American schools generally are quite committed to. Some international schools, it's not natural to parts of their population, and we've got to really help parents to fit in, whether it's issues of language or culture. I think it's important that we develop a partnership with all the components involved. As I mentioned, certainly this is a necessary piece of preparing for careers in a fast-changing world. And then the inspiring piece suggests inspiration, suggests sort of passion for learning, and teachers that are able to show a passion for the subject areas or skill areas that they're teaching, that they can convey the relevance of that so that students grab a hold of it with some inspiration. It also suggests really high-quality teaching. And I think you've probably all seen studies that show the most important factor in a high-quality school is the quality of the teachers. Nothing else is close. The facilities can be subpar. Even the curriculum and materials can be subpar, and a great teacher will get great results. In fact, this study that I reference here from a couple of years ago out of Harvard looked at the economic value of students studying with a high-value teacher. And the economic value in their lifetime earnings is hundreds of thousands of dollars if they spend time with a high-quality teacher, a teacher that is considered a master teacher. And the more years they spend with a master teacher, their lifetime earnings and other factors of success. It's not just all about pocketbook. So anyway, I think that piece speaks to all of those factors. The inquisitive in life piece, I think, is also really important. Certainly, asking good questions and questioning helps build understanding in learning. There's a lot of research over years about that. That good questioning really helps propel learning and move it forward. How many of you have read this book, Making Thinking Visible? Quite a few. There's a great. This is out of Harvard. 2 professors from Harvard, 1 from Columbia, I think, and really it's help build understanding in your students, and a great deal of it revolves around questioning. So it's a good read. And I like this quote. In fact, we had a student last year that had been at our school, which is actually fairly similar profile to EAB. Had been at our school for 2 or 3 years, and parents wanted the student to be immersed in French. So they moved him to one of the French schools in Tunis. And after a few months, they came back. And we said, well, you made this decision to take this boy to the French school. Why'd you come back? Well, they didn't like him. They said he asked too many questions. And I don't know how you did that to him, but it's a problem for them. They don't want him asking so many questions because they can't get him to memorize the details if he's asking questions. So I think it's just kind of a mindset, right? Principled in character. Remember this quote from a few years ago from Michael Thompson. Pol Pot, who many of you will know from Cambodia, one of the world's worst leaders of all time, was actually an international school student. And so I guess that's reflective of the fact that our responsibility goes beyond just academics. And it's important that we promote and model core values, that we recognize those traits in students. I think it's important that we help students when they fail with their integrity, because they will. At least that's my experience. I haven't lived a life without sin, and so I think it's important that students then know the responsibility that's involved in making errors in integrity, that they repay the damage they've done when it's appropriate, and that then they be offered forgiveness and learn to move forward. I think it's important that we promote ethics and integrity as part of a quality education, because if what we are doing is preparing students for success at all levels of their lives, whether it's economic, environmental, political, and social, they can't be successful socially if they really lack integrity. Marriages are going to fall apart. They'll be in jail. It's an important piece of what we're preparing kids for. This one was most difficult for me. It's a surprising piece of your mission statement, and it didn't resonate as quickly as the other elements, but I did have some thoughts about it. First of all, that it doesn't seem to be arrogant, but it is sort of aspirational. It seems to suggest an application of learning, so not just holding your learning in, but actually applying it. It seems to have an implication of service, and finally, it's open-ended, And I think it really is an interesting and attractive piece of your statement. I also just took the liberty of looking at your mission statement, because that's something that I think really sits strongly with me. That's this balanced education. Education includes academics, activities, arts, leadership, and service. And I was drawn into education as a coach, and have continued to coach my whole career. I was a student that was an athlete in high school and college, and was also in music, in choir, was in student government, and those things I think really were equally valuable to me as the academic training I had. Some of you are familiar with Haverford College outside of Philadelphia. Good liberal arts school. They did a 4-decade longitudinal study that looked at factors of success. What factors in a high school education were the most predictive of success in university and life? And they looked at sort of the rigorous academics, grade point average, SAT scores. None of those. The biggest predictor of success was co-curricular participation. Students that were involved in co-curricular, extracurricular activities, more likely to be successful after high school than those that weren't. Those that were involved in 2 activities during their high school years, more predictive of success than those involved in 1. Those involved in 3, more predictive than those involved in 2. And you think, oh, gosh, why is that? Well, I mean, when you think about it, here's some of the things you learn in those sorts of activities. You learn goal setting and commitment, dedication, collaboration with teammates, learn to fail, and then to be resilient, learn to reflect on why you failed, and time management. So I think that's an important piece of a well-rounded education. So, thank you. And I guess it's an opportunity for some questions.
The formal part of this meeting is finished at 4 o'clock. If you have to leave, you can leave. Alan, you can maybe stay a few minutes after if there's a few more questions after that, if you want to come down to the front after that. So we've got about 15 minutes for questions.
They're not inquisitive.
Hi, Alan. I'm Rodrigo. I'm the IB physics teacher. I've seen your CV, and it says here that recently you have specialized in the use of data, and you have given out some presentations and written some publications about it. So I wonder if you would talk a little bit about it, and what does it mean for you, and what have you applied as a policy in your past schools?
Data. Yeah, is that right? Data. Well, I guess about 10 years ago, during the time I was head of school in Kathmandu, my counselor came to me and said, Alan, we need to order the new version of the Iowa Test of Basic Skills, the ITBS. How many of you took that test? I did. And it's a paper and pencil bubble multiple choice test that essentially international schools particularly, we give it in the spring, get the results back the next fall. 20% of the students had left. We'd look at it, see how it matched up with our understanding of the student, and then drop it in a CUME folder. And for the ones that had moved away, we'd try to locate their forwarding address and send it on. And I was just thinking, I can't believe that this is the best external assessment that's in the business now. This isn't 1968. And so I researched around a bit, and the Northwest Evaluation Associates out of Portland, Oregon, that had developed the MAP test, were giving a presentation about it in Muscat, Oman, at the NISA conference. And the State Department was going to pilot the MAP assessment in 10 international schools. So I made arrangements to go, went to the presentation, was so impressed. Kathy Stetson was working for NWA then. She now is the Central European Professional Development Executive. she presented the assessment and how it works and how it hones into the level that the student's at in a particular curricular area, and how it can just tell you what they're ready to learn. And so we applied, and we were one of the first 10 schools to pilot the MAP assessment internationally 10 years ago. Since then, virtually every American international school in the world is using it, and many other of the proprietary international schools using it as well. But the problem is that the vast majority of international schools are using it like the Iowa test of basic skills. They get it, look at it, drop it in a folder. And essentially the presentations I've made and the articles I've written in the TIE basically are advocating that this is a powerful tool. It's essentially a Ferrari. And if you're using it like the Iowa test of basic skills, you're essentially pushing it around the parking lot. You haven't even really started it up yet, because there's powerful use of that. And the most powerful is to analyze student growth. And the vast majority of American international schools are only giving the test twice a year. I know you guys give it 3 times, and I congratulate you on that. One of the first things that we learned as the State Department trained our staff to use that test was that the most important testing window is the winter test, because then you see what sort of growth you've gotten from a student in the first half of the year. You see what they're ready to learn, and you can group students and make instructional decisions with them, and you can make interventions when you need to. And so the big focus that we really learned was to focus on growth. And we learned some things that were actually quite remarkable. The research says that when students join us in kindergarten, they're basically at a 5-year spectrum of learning readiness. 2 years behind grade level, 2 years ahead of grade level, and at grade level. So even when they first come to us, there's a 5-year spectrum. And if we make no interventions, all we do is that becomes our responsibility as educators, and we just move that 5-year span along the line. And really, one of the things that we learned was that kids are not magically going to catch up to their grade level. It takes additional direct instruction. And so schools have to find ways to provide additional direct instruction to move students ahead. And so that's essentially kind of the message, is that, people have adopted this assessment, but they're really not using it in ways that are very powerful yet. Sure. I don't know about the package yet, but the school and the experience. Yeah, she asked what, she said she knows I've only been here for 2 days, but what excites me about EAB and Brasilia. It's a school that's got a good reputation. Obviously, as I've been around the campus for 2 days, I can see that students enjoy being here. They're engaged in their learning. They have pride in this institution. The staff have pride. I've been really impressed with the kind of quality of people that I've been meeting. It's a school that really seems on a positive trajectory, even when Brazil's been through some bumpy times. And so that's interesting. Brasilia has been on my radar for a number of years, just because it's such a livable place and clean and well organized, obviously, from the 1950s and 60s. And so, it certainly, I haven't been here before, but it certainly is attractive. I haven't had much time to get out and sightsee yet, but yeah, I've been really impressed with what I see.
Hi, Alan. My name is Anna, and I'm a first grade teacher. And what I would like to ask you, obviously, you have already sort of shared part of it. You talked about data and the importance of data for intervention groups, and I would say that that is a success. Do you have any particular success and perhaps one challenge from your previous school or previous work that you would like to share with us, and how you've managed to overcome a challenge, and then share a success as well, if you could?
Sure. There are some challenges I could spend quite a while on. I won't dwell on those, actually. I have to warn people that when I take a new job, there's generally a revolution that happens. I've managed schools through two no, in the country. So, but I guess what something I'd reference is that when I took my current job in Tunisia, it was this is my 6th year, so it was essentially 7 years ago. I was hired just about a year ahead of time, as seems to be the practice in these searches now. And the school was just completing its 10-year self-study through CIS in Europe and the Middle States in the U.S. And so during the year before I arrived, the school was spending a great deal of time on its accreditation self-study. And so I came for a visit for a week that year, and just kind of a listening tour, and heard from all the staff, spent time meeting with grade level teams, departments, local staff, parents, students, the board, of course, and kind of gathering thoughts. And then in the spring before I arrived, the accreditation report arrived. And so for my leadership team and I, that was really our playbook for the first couple of years. And, we had 3 areas that we really needed to attend to. One was mathematics, and the whole sequencing of the math was really not very well done. They had 1 level of math right up until IB diploma splits into 3 in grade 11. So it was math 7, math 8, math 9, math 10, studies, standards, higher level. Go figure, who says that's good practice? And student support services were another. The school had doubled in size in the previous few years, and they hadn't kept pace with student support, academic support. And then world languages was another area. We had teaching staff in French and Arabic there that were trained in French systems that were very sort of traditional rote memorization approaches to learning. So pedagogically, they weren't really where our other teachers were in terms of approaches to learning. And so those were 3 areas that we took on. And 5 years later, CIS and Middle States came back, and they said we'd met or exceeded all the recommendations from 5 years earlier, and that we were doing an exemplary job. And so we were really pleased. And it's a team effort, obviously. We had to hire some key leaders to take on some of these issues. We had to do some professional development. We had to make some really research-based decisions about curriculum alignment and instruction, and really move ahead. And it was fun to do. And who benefits? The students that we serve.
Hi, I am Gracinha. I teach Brazilian Social Studies High School. And we, as you may know, the majority of our students are Brazilians. And we have a very strong interaction with the local community. They play a huge role on this school. So I'd like you to talk about how do you see, how was your relation with the local community in Tunisia or Singapore or maybe Nepal? How do you see it?
Well, I'm sure when I leave Tunis, it'll be the same way. And I look forward to another opportunity to work with local staff. I mean, they're the spine of a school like this. The international people tend to come and go largely, and there's usually a spine of local employees that make work at the school their life's career. And so, I think it's important that those people are valued and recognized and respected and heard from. I mean, those are the historians of the school. And it's really part of the magic of schools like this. You've got Brazilian students, you've got one of the biggest diplomatic enclaves in the world. So you're putting together people from all around the planet, and that's a real magic in these schools, and you can see it. I think when you've got a population that's as big a host country population as you have here, you certainly have to continually remind students that they need to integrate, that if you're not making friends with the host country nationals, or if you're a host country national and you're not really making friends with the international students, you're missing out on a big opportunity. I mean, that's why you're here. So I think, in schools like this, we have to remind students of the value of that and continue to educate them about it. But I've loved this work. I was saying the other day, I think I've worked with families now from every country in the world except Vatican City and North Korea. So, pretty fun.
Along that vein of reminding students to, you guys can hear me?
I can.
Hi. Along that vein, sorry, I'm Kyra Franklin. I work in third grade. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet.
Nice to meet you.
Along the vein of reminding students to integrate more, how do you do that yourself? How do you ensure that you're integrating with the local population, and what do you do to remind yourself of that?
Well, I think, part of that comes from just a general approach to life, and an approach that values everyone and respects everyone, and leadership that really is about service and not entitlement. I think that's a big problem. And so I think just valuing people, being visible, getting to know people. One of the things that's helped me get to know some of my local staff is a weekly pickup football game. You learn a lot about people when you play sports with them, and then just being around the school, being at events, taking time to get to know people, and I think it's just an approach to the work and the schools and an appreciation of it. It doesn't seem difficult. It seems an opportunity.
Hi. We met before. My name is Anan. I'm fourth grade teaching assistant and AD. A big part of the relationship with the community at EAB and in Brazil goes through the language. Tell us a little bit, what is your, per se, willingness or ideas to learning or Portuguese?
Yeah, I certainly would be committed to. I don't know much now. I can get by clumsily in French and speak a little bit of Spanish, but I would hope that my Portuguese would at least rise to the not outstanding level of my French. I'm not a great language learner, but I'm certainly willing to, and I think it's important.
So I heard you play football, and that's great, right? We're in Brazil. But do you consider yourself prepared to play football against the native Brazilians? Are you in good shape?
Maybe the Brazilians that are about my age.
We take seriously this here in Brazil. Football is...
I understand that. I lived in Europe as a kid, and so began playing football when I was a kid. And then I moved back to the U.S. when I was in middle school. And at that time, soccer in the U.S. was little known. And who played it but the ethnic community? And so that's who I played with all my time growing up. In high school, it wasn't yet a varsity sport. It was a club sport. And it was, it was all the ethnic community that was in the school. When I got to university, same thing. It was a club sport, and it was the ethnic community and just a handful of us that played. I remember in 1994, the U.S. was hosting the World Cup, and we got out of the group stage, and we had a game against Brazil. And I was traveling across the U.S. at that time, and I sent Julie and my sons to the park while I went to find some place to watch the game. Spokane, Washington, a pretty big city. Nothing was open and showing the game. I had to talk somebody to opening up their bar and turning on the TV to let me watch the U.S. play Brazil in a World Cup quarterfinal game by myself. Well, back up to the last World Cup, and the U.S. was just crazy. I mean, bars were just full of people. So the U.S. has woken up to that sport. But for me, it's been a lifelong favorite.
Oh, yes. We had a great conversation about the Brazilian requirements and the Brazilian laws and the Brazilian rules, and I'd like to know how can you ensure that we will follow the Brazilian law? Can you explain a little bit?
Well, I think I'd need to take your advice.
Great.
That's the bottom.
Will be awesome.
I think that's the bottom line of that question. I understand from friends of mine that have worked in Brazil how the interface is with the Ministry of Education, and it seems that Brasilia, being the capital, that compliance is even more important and more insisted upon. So it's part of the work, something we'd have to do and figure out solutions. And as you were telling me yesterday, you can't make some changes very quickly, because if they affect a Ministry of Education decision, you need time to see if you can get permission. So I guess just making sure we're communicating and consulting. But I think it's a piece of the work that I'll have to learn. But most of this work I know pretty well.
Okay.
Okay. On that note of knowing this job pretty well, in respect to transparency, how transparent are you when there's issues that need to be dealt with that affect the whole community?
I think some of you know, well, I told you already, I've led schools through 2 revolutions, and in 2012, the school I'm the head of was attacked, and a building destroyed and the campus looted. And one of the things that I've learned over my years in this role is that you need to be as transparent as possible, particularly in difficult times. There are certain things that have to be confidential, people's personal matters and so on. But decisions about a school, most of the time, it's important that the board and the leadership team be as transparent as you possibly can. And that's particularly true when you're going through a crisis. And I think people then learn they can trust you if you do what you say what you mean, and they trust your integrity. And that's you need to build that trust over time, and not erode it. So I'm highly committed to that.
Yes, my question is, I am curious how you have supported the arts at the other schools you've been in.
Okay. As I said earlier, I see co-curriculars as an essential piece of education. You know, I was a student that was involved in choir, both concert choir and a jazz choir, but I'm the least talented musician in my family. All the other members of my immediate family have music degrees. Julie has a music degree. Both our sons have music degrees. And, you know, while sports were really big for me, choir was a fun piece. For our sons, it was drama and music that were really the things that caught them. And one of them has a degree in double bass performance, the other one in opera vocal performance, and so they've been involved in the arts a great deal, and we've seen great value in it for them.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm wondering what you see as the role of the current IB program at our school and the potential for other IB programs like the PYP and MYP.
Sure. I'm a big fan of the IB diploma program. I think it's the best university preparation that's out there. I worked at advanced placement schools for most of my career. The last 6 years, we've been an IB diploma school. The school I'm at is, and they've had the program going for nearly 20 years. And I think it's much more integrated than AP programs. Involves research, service, involves at least one world language. Got to take a range of classes, at least 3 of which, you know, are higher level. And I think the students that I've talked to, without fail, tell us that when they've gone to university, they found it relatively easy. They know how to do research, how to write, and their preparation in math and science was good. Their preparation in languages was good, and they've been very successful. So I think it's important that program continue to be developed, that when we have an opportunity to hire people, there are people, if we can, that have IB experience and a track record of success. If they aren't, that we provide training before they even start with kids on that 2-year journey. And so, huge fan of the diploma program. In terms of MYP and PYP, I think, you know, the school I'm at and what I see at EAB is you have essentially a commitment to the ideals of it without having to pay for an external validation and more work on your part. So I don't necessarily see the need for an IB diploma school to also add MYP and PYP. I just think it's not really a scope and sequence curriculum. It's a philosophical overlay, and I think you can accomplish all that without prescribing.
Hi, it's me again, right in front of you. I was wondering, sorry, I forgot my question. I
forgot. Considering what's been going on in Brazil recently and the fact that you mentioned the importance of quality teachers to a school, could you discuss your strategies for staffing and maybe what sets you apart to bring quality people into the building?
Sure. I mean, teacher recruitment and retention is some of the most important work that we do. And, you know, we've talked a bit about that. I think the approach that the team here has used is similar to the approach I use. I haven't been to a recruitment fair in 10 years. my team does our recruiting generally by the winter break for the following year, so that we're picking off the best candidates before other schools have. I think it's also important that we do our best to retain the good people that we have, and it appears that the board here has tried to find creative ways to compensate for the devaluation of the EI, and I think that's important that we keep apprised to that, keep an eye on people's wages. It's also important that we recognize people for the good work they do. I think that provides probably more than almost anything else in a school, is recognizing the good work that people do, giving people opportunities for promotion and growth internally, and just providing good professional development and providing them with good colleagues that make it a pleasure to work, people that they can work with and collaborate with. And I think all those pieces go into building and retaining a really world-class faculty. Well, people seem to be hitting the time button. So, folks, I'd like to thank you very much for spending time with me this afternoon and give me the opportunity to get to know your school. And thanks again. Appreciate it. Thank you. Nice to meet you. All right. Thank you. When are you guys on? Tonight. 8:30. Yeah. So,
No rest for the weary, huh?
yeah, it's a whirlwind. Hey, thanks. You too. Thank you.